Hey there, this is Ill Factor from beatacademy.com. And in this video, I want to take a look at Wave's brand new Studio Rack plugin. Now, when it comes to getting the sound that I'm looking for, whether it's my vocal tracks or my drums, I'm not necessarily looking for just one plugin, but yet multiple plugins to really shape and craft and produce the tone and sound that I'm looking for. And so the Wave Studio Rack plugin is a way to do that, combine multiple plugins all in one, and have the ability to just instantly access all of those plugins with the turn of a knob. And there's some really cool things that we can do, such as multi-band processing and parallel processing. Now, this type of workflow is not new to me. This is something I've been doing for a very long time using Ableton Live. Been able to create an audio rack and then have that audio rack filled with multiple plugins and control them with macro knobs and some. So I want to show you how even with using Ableton Live, how the Studio Rack can still be a helpful tool in your workflow. So let's dive right in. So I'm going to focus over to my drum bus, where all my drums and percussion are routed to in this project. And let's go ahead and put a Studio Rack plugin directly on the drum bus. Now, at first glance, pretty straightforward. You have your rack, so you can pretty much just create a whole chain of plugins that you would want to use. And I really like the ease of the search function here. So it's already categorized. If I'm looking for any type of dynamics, EQ. So if I was looking at EQ, just grab any one of the plugins here and browse to any specific plugin that I might be wanting to add. So maybe REQ 2, and then do any tweaking here that I'd like. And then just continue to add plugins on top of that chain. So it's pretty straightforward. Then you have your macro, which you can assign any of these macros to any parameter on any of the plugins. And you can actually assign multiple parameters to one macro. And then you could see both the rack and the macro in the all tab. Now you can go ahead and also create parallel and multi-band splits. So let's start with that parallel split. And this is going to give you one channel that will be the dry signal, and then another channel that can be parallel with that with any of the effects that you want to put on there. So we'll keep the first one dry, and I'll enable channel 2. And let's say we wanted to add some harmonic. Let's add some Abbey Road saturator on that. So then what we can now do is just solo channel 2 just to hear the effect of what the Abbey Road is going to be doing to the drums. Now I can go ahead and maybe add an EQ after that. So I'll go to EQ here, and maybe we'll go back to that REQ2 and grab that one there. And then I'm probably just going to take away some of the low end. Really gritty there. So now I'm going to go ahead and unsolo that and just kind of blend in the mix of these distorted drums along with the dry signal on channel 1. And the cool thing to take note of is that each individual channel is loaded or preloaded in the back end with a S1 stereo imager. So I can click that W and actually give more width by increasing that or actually inverting that, going backwards. But I can give more width to that effects chain or that rack that I am creating. So that's really cool having that already embedded in there. Now, as I mentioned before, this is a current workflow that I'm used to. Here in my Ableton Live audio effect rack, we have my dry chain, just as we did in the parallel split. And then you have the effect one, my next effect rack, and so on here. So it's very similar to the current workflow that I have in here. And so I just really like the ease of the layout here in the Studio Rack, because as I create another channel here, another chain, we can specify if we want the mid, if I want to only affect the mid information, the mid signal, or even the side signal, which is cool because now I can apply effects to just the information that's going off on the side. What's happening on the width here. The left or the right, could easily be applied there as well. And, you can create as many multiple parallel chains as you want here. But what I find really cool is this next option is the multi-band split. And this allows me to create crossovers so that I can focus on frequency specific parts of the sound and apply effects to that. So here we have, let's add another one here. So we have a three racks here. And so rack one, it means that anything below 92 hertz, anything from 92 hertz and below will be affected by whatever plugins we load on here. So let's solo that and let's listen in. So now I can go over here and add maybe just a little bit of dynamic. So maybe I want to add smack attack here. So I'll put smack and look for smack attack, and then just go ahead and add some of that, maybe to give some more punchiness to that bottom end. And I can also blend that in with the other band. So here we have the smack attack on the low end. Maybe I want to just move that to the mid. So I'll just go ahead and solo that. And it's going to make more sense here because that's where a lot of the knock from the kick drum is coming from. So now let's go ahead and unsolo that. And now I can also, with the S1 embedded in the channel, widen up maybe the highs. Now I gotta say, I do like the ease of adding multiple bands to work on. So you simply hit the plus button on the top here and you can add up to 5 different frequency bands and adjust which frequencies are you gonna have the crossover on. When meaning like, instead of 92, let's say I want everything from 106 hertz below to be affected by all of these effects in this rack. So that can be pretty cool because then you have all these effects that you can create to just focus in on that specific frequency. And then once you have all that set and done, you can then affect all of that with another plugin and so on and so on. And so with all these effects and the possibility of all these chain of, effect chains that you're going to be creating, it could be overwhelming and it could get out of control. And that's where the macro really comes into play. Because then you can assign multiple parameters from multiple different plugins to one knob so that when you turn that knob, it's going to affect all those parameters at once. So you can do this by hitting the assign knob and clicking on a parameter, or you can simply right click on that parameter and add to macro 1. And that's going to assign that to that macro so that when I turn my macro knob here, it will affect that. And like I mentioned, you can also click on any other parameter and add that to either the same macro or another one. I'll add it to the same. And now macro 1 goes up, and so does the duration and the attack. And then you can go into the edit and determine the range. Let's say we don't want the duration to go completely maxed out. So I can go over here and just set my parameters. Like the maximum that duration could go is maybe, let's just type in 400. All right. So now when I turn macro knob 1, that will stop all the way at 400, but my smack will continue to go to 100. Now, it is really cool to see the Waves ecosystem in this studio rack format. But as you can see, it can be very overwhelming with all of these plugins now and the parallel, and it can get crazy. And so that's why I think starting to make some musical decisions as to how this can really help in your workflow is to start to look at some of the presets already loaded in the studio rack. And what this is just an opportunity to see all these multiple plugins working together and really focusing in more on the macro, on some of the musical decisions that can be made to get the sound that you're looking for. So if we go to the factory here, and since I do have this on my drum bus, let me see what drums driver will do. And immediately, we're not taken to the rack, although we can see here, but I like that we're focusing in on the macros because now I'm coming across words if I want it hot, if I want to push, high cut, low cut, that's cool. And I can start making more musical decisions as opposed to maybe getting in depth and lost in the technical stuff when I'm seeing the individual plugins. So here, let's start tweaking around and coming up with a sound that I like using this preset. Cool. So I like what the second macro it's pushing, and it's definitely it enables and turned on this Kramer compressor, and then we have a little bit of high cut and some drive here under that macro. So again, it's once you've taken the time that you're crafting and you're creating all these chains and different all the effects and plugins put together, you can then just focus on using the macros as driving more of the musical decisions as to what you want out of the sound and try to getting the sound that you're looking for. So let's go ahead. Let's try another one here. I'll go to count and try tight drum bus. Let's see what that does here. So here we've got two multi-band splits. We got the first multi-band using a CLA. That's what it looks like. Another Kramer Pi, and then we have another multi-band with some saturation here and some the J37. So really, just crafting all these together and putting it, accessible to just control with the macros. Now, as I mentioned earlier, having a rack with multiple chains of plugins and being able to control them with macros is nothing new to my workflow. It's something I've been doing in Ableton Live for a long time. But the reason why I think the Studio Rack plugin is a great, powerful tool is because I believe it's bridging that gap between multiple DAWs and multiple producers and creatives who are going to be using a lot of the Waves plugin and allowing each other to really influence each other with creating a unique approach to making musical decisions, such as the macros in each other's projects. So what I mean by that is I get a lot of people who are asking, hey, you've got this audio effect rack and you've crafted this unique sound, but I'm not really able to do that exactly in Pro Tools or in Logic or whichever, DAW. Well, now using the Studio Rack, we can now influence each other in that aspect. And so what that means is we can now expect great, presets and that have been crazily mapped out and allowing you to focus more on the musical decisions with the macros that you can apply and not get hung up on the small details of critiquing all the plugins individually, but yet as a whole, what's the big picture that you're going to be applying to your sound? And I think that's what makes this plugin very powerful. By the way, this is a free plugin by Waves, so you can access it by clicking the link below in the description box or just visiting the Waves website and have fun experimenting, creating all these unique individual chains. I know that sometimes when you're working within a new environment, especially even a plugin window, it could inspire a new way and a new approach to crafting the sound that you're looking for with multiple plugins. So thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.